Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dave Emmons Show. And today, or whatever day that you listen to this, I have kind of like a special guest. He's a homie. He's from the Metro St. Louis area. I don't usually give pinpoint places or names or of towns because for a reason, and Cory knows the reasons for that. But usually interview people with the UFOs. Cory's got my guest today. Let's get to that. Is Cory Sellars. He's from the Metro East, and we're very, very close. And he's actually been working as a reporter. He worked under a Pulitzer Prize Winner reporter, and he'll tell you the name of that guy. And also, he was a researcher as a reporter, including debunking roaring sound from Portage to Sioux power plant, unexplained sightings. And then he's been in the local music scene. He's put together punk rock and rock shows for charities, and that's very commendable to him. I like that because I used to do some of that, playing in those types of programs, those venues. He's a local music fan, and he checks out bands locally. And he's also into David Jacobs and Jacques Vallée, and those are two of the greatest ufologists ever, and actually taught college in those classes, the first ones to ever teach college in those classes. And David Jacobs is a guy that I've met, and I told him about some of my experiences, and I had a good time. But that's not about me today. This is about Cory Sellars, and he's had some UFO experiences, all in this area, Metro East area, just like me. I've had all my experiences here in the Metro East area. And that's why this drew me to Cory, because I just want to, hear what he's seen, what happened in this local area. So, but he's also, he's a graduate of radio school. And that's another reason I had him, because we have a lot of commonalities there in radio and journalism. And I'm sure we're going to have a kind of back and forth about some of the things that's happened in the past with ufology. And right now he's working as a part-time. He's been with the Old Telegraph. He's worked there back in the early 2015, 2014, those areas. He's worked, I guess, with the Ad Advantage too.
No, never worked with the Advantage.
Not with the Ad Advantage.
That is the one paper I've not worked at. I worked at Riverbender, and I was like I wasn't the editor, but I was like the newsroom organizer. I was like the lead reporter there for about 2 years.
Okay. I thought the Riverbender was very associated with the Ad Advantage. They're
no,
different.
It's very different, yeah.
All right. Well, you see, that's what happens when we're homies. We know these things, and sometimes I haven't kept up with those changes. But Cory Sellars, tell us a little bit about yourself. I kind of watched up a little bit of that, but tell us a little bit.
You did great.
Right.
I'm just a weird guy trying to figure things out, really. Overall, I have a passion for journalism. I like dinosaurs, and I really like the paranormal, especially aliens. Like, I know, like, the Metro East includes Alton, which is like one of the most haunted towns in the country or whatever, and a bunch of other places that are also supposedly haunted, like up the River Road to Elsa and stuff. Like, I'm not giving out where we live or anything. I'm just saying, like, those are areas in the St. Louis Metro East that are associated with some haunted stuff. And then you got the Piasaw bird. That's a weird cryptid. And so, I don't know. I've just always grown up being fascinated by the unknown and trying to figure it out piece by piece.
We talked earlier in the pre-chat that you have a different outlook on the ghost and the energies that could be here in this area. What is it? You think they're dimensional, or are there ETs? I just wrote a book about that. Ghosts, ETs, angels. Tried to draw a difference between them. It's really hard because they're all extraterrestrial.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of Jacques Vallée, and I also recently read The Mothman Prophecies, like read it by John Keel. And I like the idea of like the Fortean idea, like it's all connected somehow. And I'm not smart enough to venture like what connects them. Like that's my thing. Like, are they from another dimension? I don't know what another dimension would look like or what it would do. Are they from outer space? I don't know. I don't know how they would get here. I'm not really like, but I do know that there are patterns that have repeated themselves in my own experience, in histories I've studied, in folklore, and in other people's stories. Like there seems to be these repeating patterns, and they're intangible, they're hard to measure, almost impossible to measure, and they seem sentient. So
Right.
it's strange to me. Like I can't even venture to guess what they are. Like that's where
I
I'm at with it.
Yeah, I finished this Angels book, Supernatural, and I've done a lot of research. A lot of times I don't like doing a lot of research. That's a lot of work, and you know that, Corey, when you get
Oh
into
yeah, I
things.
love research. Research
Yeah,
is one of my favorite things.
but it takes it takes time though. It took me longer to write this last book. I just turned in the manuscript, and I'm still putting together pictures. But I was looking at the differences between ghosts and ETs. There is dimension. We're in 3D, we're third dimensional. And when we go from here, our souls go from here, we go into dimensions. Because you remember Jesus said, my Father has many mansions. He meant dimensions. That back then in those days, they didn't understand exactly what he was trying to tell them.
Yeah,
That's
there's
why he
been
had to
like
talk simple parables.
yeah, there's been like 5 different translations of the New Testament, and you got like Greek to English and Hebrew and Aramaic, and you got to make sense of all these phrases. And on top of that, like the language of that time, like yeah, I definitely do like to go into like mysticism with the Bible and most other holy books. Like the Tibetan Book of the Dead has very similar themes to what you just mentioned about there being many places set for us in the afterlife, like many different options.
Right. The Egyptians also, Corey, had this. They have these gods, what they called gods, and I studied Isis, the gal. She was the wife of Osiris,
Hmm.
Osiris. Okay, but they talked about having each one of their gods has an equivalent angel from the from the Judaism and the Christian beliefs.
Yep.
They have comparable angels, and I thought to myself, well, the Egyptians were a lot smarter than I thought. They did have a basis for angels and afterlife. They had the afterlife down pretty pat, but they have a different way of channeling it or going to it, like
Yeah.
going from a boat. They think they're going in a boat, and then they put all these supplies into the dead king's tomb or whatever. But they had the idea, but I don't know. Okay, let's get into what you might have seen. You talked about seeing, you had an alien dream at 13 or 14. That's exactly
Yeah.
when I started. Tell us about that.
Oh, okay. So I was like always a weird kid. Maybe I should start a little earlier with like some of the stuff that like led up to me pondering this dream because my mom was believes that I was abducted as a baby. And my
Right.
mom's a silly person. She's a wild card to say the very least. She's a
That's good
character.
though. Yeah.
Yeah, she's quite the character. She told me that she was going out to smoke a cigarette whenever I was like 6 months old at our family farm up in the wilds somewhere
Okay.
between St. Louis and Quincy.
Okay.
Anyways, up in the wilds, and she said she goes in and all the power had just gone out. She said there's a blue flash and all the power went out. And there's no transformers up here. We're talking like middle of the woods kind of deal.
Mhm.
And she said that she heard a buzz and she looked in my like little sleeping area and I was sitting straight up with all black eyes and a giant smile. And she was like, I knew at that point you were one of them. And I'm like, Mom, that sounds insane. I don't believe you. But I used to have like complete, just tear filled mental breakdowns whenever I would go shopping and there would be like Whitley Strieber's communion book. Cause like that was like early 90s. I was like a little kid. So she thinks I have this extreme history with aliens and it runs in our family, she says. And I'm a skeptical dude. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if aliens are real. So around 13 or 14, I have this dream that I'm surrounded by this velvet curtain, this purple velvet curtain. And there were like shadow people on the other side of it, like the hat men that people describe.
Right.
And they talked about reincarnation a lot, like how I have a goal to achieve, that there's a mission to accomplish, and that I should do it in this life so I don't have to do it again. And I was like, that's really weird. And I had not like researched samsara or Buddhism at that time. So I'm like, okay, whatever, reincarnation. I was going to Catholic school, and I'm like, that isn't real. You die, you go to heaven or hell. And it's like, the universe is way more complicated than you think, man.
Yes,
Don't
it
let
is.
God be limited. And I was
Right.
like, don't let God be limited. That's a wild sentence. So then the purple veil drops, and instead of these shadow people, there's a mantis looking thing, but not like a bug, like mantis, like it wasn't insectoid. It just looked kind of like a mantis, and its hands like flowed. Like it had very long fingers that almost seemed to flow unnaturally. And it was wearing like this robe that was the same color purple, but very different texture. And there was this seat in this wide expanse of white, and this screen unfolded itself in front of me, and it just started showing me like things, like crazy, crazy shit. Like one of them I realized later in life was the Ferguson riots,
Right.
because like that was one of the ways I like cut my teeth as a reporter. I never got to go into the actual like riots itself, but my old boss did, and he would like talk about it a lot. And I was like at home watching the live streams, hoping he was okay and everything. And specifically the scene where this armored personnel carrier went over a little rock wall, like a little like person built rock wall by the McDonald's. It rocked a little bit, and that just unlocked something. And I was like, whoa, I saw that in my alien dream whenever I was 13. And then it also showed like this part's crazy, and it's such a vivid part of this dream, but it was like lifeless bodies inside of like vacuum sealed husks basically.
Mhm.
And there was like this warehouse, and these poor people were like having their consciousness uploaded into like this computer, and then they were going to see if they could download it into this husk from this like vacuum sealed bag. And like as I got older, I'm like, wow, that'd make a really good sci-fi story, like the rich experimenting on poor people to see if they can upload their consciousness and download them into a designer body. Like that sounds exactly what like our society's leading to in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. Because they wouldn't give that to the common person. The common person would not get a new body or whatever. So I thought that was really strange. And I at the time only knew of people claiming to see the little gray guys and the reptilians. I had not heard of the mantids. And it wasn't until I was 20 I saw somebody had like drawn a picture of exactly what I saw, and I looked at it. I'm like, oh, that was that weird giant bug from my dream. And then I was like, oh, that was my weird giant bug from my dream. And that kind of freaked me out a lot, like seeing somebody else draw this weird monster you saw in your dream, that like it changed the whole course of the rest of my life. Like full disclosure, I do have bipolar, and I did have PTSD, and I still kind of do, but it's like it did not hit those same lines, like it did not seem like a mental illness thing. It seemed like a really weird dream that I had as a kid of my subconscious telling me to try harder, and that the future's gonna suck. And I have to be the kind of person to meet that. Like
Right.
that's what the dream felt like.
Dreams like that, lucid dreams that you don't forget, like
Yeah.
you're telling it just like it just happened, and that's great.
Yeah.
Lucid dreams, they're able to get into your consciousness and actually control you or leave memories in your mind. There's three ways they abduct you. Number one is bedside. I've had a couple of bedside. They just do their thing bedside. They take semen samples or DNA, and they take frequency samples, or they upload your memories to find out what you've done and how you lived and everything. They're curious about that. Number two is they actually take you on board a ship, and I've had lucid dreams of being on board a ship, and it's hard to tell whether you were really abducted or not, because that's a thin line with a lucid dream and abduction.
Yeah.
The third way is what I've experienced the last 6 years. You wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning and you're frozen. You're frozen stiff. You're shaking the bed violently, and you don't wake up your wife next to you. And she usually wakes up with a cell phone drops on the carpet. And I was shaking the bed violently. It was really cold. Got up, had to go to the bathroom, and I come back, and I was so wore out that I fell asleep. This is when they take your energy, your soul, your consciousness, and they take that through dimensional travel. We talked about dimension. They will take your consciousness, your soul, and your energy in order to make it go into the next dimension and leave your body cold, but they don't leave it long enough for you to croak. but they come back and you're in your body. But I fell asleep, also wore out. So those are three ways. Now, the way that you're talking about a dream, a lucid dream, you could have been abducted and not know it. David
Well, I
Jacobs
mean, I'm
talks
open
about
to
that.
that.
Yeah, 50% of people who feel that they've had a bad dream. David Jacobs, the guy that we both love, he says that 50% of the people who've been abducted, they don't even know it.
That's wild. Yeah, like there was another time I woke up and all the power was out in my house, and I was on the second floor of the house, and I fell asleep on the first floor. And I was like sleepwalking. The only time I've ever sleepwalked, and I was like awake trying to find out where I was, and I was in the top floor of the house, and there was like a very bright light right outside the window. They got smaller and smaller and smaller, and I looked down and like my shirt's covered in blood, and I couldn't see where it came from. Like my nose wasn't bleeding, and like it was my blood because it was on the inside of the shirt, and it was almost like I had been cut open or something. But there was
Mm.
no scar. Like that was weird. I chalked that up to like that was just a weird time to have as a kid. Like again, I don't know enough about like the phenomenon per se to like speak as to what did occur, but these are things that are like consistent with the narrative of the phenomenon. It's like a very bizarre thing, and in a way it almost felt like we were talking before the show, like almost shamanic in a way,
Right.
like an initiation rite is what it almost felt like. It felt like an initiation rite into something, but what it was, I'm struggling with figuring it out.
Do you have memories of that journey when you did take that shamanic trip?
My shamanic trip was less alien related and more hallucinogenic related.
Right.
Yeah. I had a wild night downtown one night, and I found myself being offered LSD, and I had done LSD, and I was like, yeah, you know what? That sounds fun. I'm too drunk to make this decision, but yeah, let's do some LSD, guys. So I did more than I thought I did. And the next thing I know, I wake up in this like tube of water. I like push open this door, and there's this being there with like two rows of three eyes and like really long fingers and like seven fingers on each hand, and they had claws. And I look down and I have seven fingers on each hand and they end in claws. And there's like writing everywhere that I could read, but it wasn't any script I've ever seen. And it basically said loading. And it told like this being on the other side said in a feminine mind voice, the best I can describe it. You need to go back. The game is not fun without you. And I said, the game? And then I just got shoved back into this tube. It filled up full of water. And then my entire consciousness was picked apart by like these little machine elves, like Terrence McKenna talked about.
Mhm.
Only they all look like this cartoon character from Gravity Falls called Bill Cipher, which is a little triangle head with an eye in it. And it had like little arms and legs. And it was like, here's your personality. So I reconstructed my entire personality bit by bit and threw away the things that didn't serve me anymore, like like trauma and like negative feelings toward people from my past. Like I got rid of it. I got rid of the grand majority of it. And the things I couldn't get rid of, I at least had a marker on, so I saw them. And the next day, I wake up in the bathroom covered in blood and a little bit of pee, and my entire view of the world like just completely changed. I became a lot more loving, a lot more forgiving, a lot more accepting and accommodating. I didn't care as much about the power structures of the world, and I cared a lot more about like my own internal power and what I could do to help people find their own path. Like I didn't have the answers. I had the ability to see in other people what they needed to be seen.
Right.
And
It
it really
sounds,
helped
yeah,
me.
sounds like an angelic type of visit with these entities. Yeah, they helped you. They've improved your consciousness, and they uplifted you, enlightened you.
Yeah.
And the shamans also, what they do is they smoke that peyote, and
Uh,
now they smoke that marijuana. But there's another drug too that they smoke and they get high, and only certain leaders of the tribes, American Native Indians, they still kind of do that. They have shamans, and there's other shamans too, like in New Orleans and everything else. But they smoke this to escape this realm, and they go to another dimension by getting high and going through there. Well, our government used that. We talked about that, the
Yep.
pre-chat show.
Government used MK Ultra.
Yeah. Talk about that. You know a little bit about that MK Ultra and the
Yeah.
LSD. Was it LSD?
Yeah, I believe so. Like Albert Hoffman, I believe, is the guy who made LSD. He was experimenting with chemicals on his ride he was on a little bike ride and he was tripping and he had a great time. And in small doses, LSD is fantastic. Like it's euphoric. It makes everything great. Like I'm not going to advocate it because you're rarely going to get actual LSD. You're going to get 2CB. You're going to get all sorts of other horrible chemicals that just make your brain all crazy. Like don't do drugs. And if you insist on doing drugs, get a test kit. Like make sure you know what you have. Like that's a very important message to psychonauts out there. Like anybody who's like, I don't care what anybody says, I'm going to do these drugs. It's like, get a test kit. Don't put anything.
Yeah, too much fentanyl.
Yep. Well, in acid, it wouldn't be fentanyl. It'd be like research chemicals. Like fentanyl's whenever like you're doing blow, which personally, I think blow has enough negative baggage. You should not be doing cocaine. Like deforestation of the rainforest. You got child slaves involved in that. It's
right.
just a whole bad bag. You should not be doing that. But yeah, if like acid is more of like they'll give you research chemicals instead of actual like acid. But yeah, so in small doses, great time. In big doses, you have no idea where you're at. Everything falls apart, and whatever happens, like I've seen people not come back from that.
Right. Well, we don't condone that on the show here about using. But the thing of it is, once you start little, then you go greater, and you take in more, and then you're in the overdose area.
Oh yeah,
I've known several people who's overdosed and they're gone. So yeah, we don't
like. Yeah. I don't think I'll ever do acid again after that. I feel like to do so would be I don't know. I feel like I got the point. I feel like I got exactly what it wanted to tell me, and doing any more would be greed or gluttony, one of those two.
Right. But the shamans still use something to get
ayahuasca.
High. Yeah, ayahuasca.
Peyote. Yeah. Mushrooms.
Mushrooms too.
I'm a big fan of psilocybin. Like
they use that medically.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, psilocybin is a really good antidepressant if like under like medical supervision, of course. Like I'm not being like, hey, you should just go pluck mushrooms and eat them. No. It's I truly believe in its ability to help people heal from a lot of mental anguish. Like I said earlier, I have PTSD. My experience with psilocybin has greatly enhanced my quality of life. It helped me feel more attuned to nature as well. Like I feel very in tune with a lot of the land I've grown up on. And it was after these experiences that I actually had the most significant UFO experience in my life.
Okay,
so
tell us,
a good lead up.
Yeah, Cory, tell us a little bit about your UFOs that you've seen in this area. And we're talking surrounding counties, Metro East. And could you tell us about some of the sightings you saw? And you traveled around, you traveled to these different counties. We're talking, let's see, Madison County, Jersey County, Calhoun County. You went to those, and Pike. Tell us a little about what you saw and if you had witnesses with you.
So I've only had a few with witnesses. I've had like one where like we just saw like weird lights and stuff, but the one that really, really hits home, there's just like one really big one that, because I've seen like triangles, I've seen bright blue and white lights like all around this area, especially like kind of I don't know if you know where Fosterburg is. It's like out in the boonies. Yeah, like I've seen them out there. I've seen them up in like by the river and stuff, but the most significant one was at my old family property, which is in like Jersey County kind of. And I'm looking up, it's the Leonids meteor shower. So I got like 7 of my friends, we're all hanging out by this tree. Illinois had just made weed legal, so we're smoking some joints, we're having a good night. Not everyone was smoking joints though. This is very important. The people who were not smoking joints had the exact same experience. I just had to kind of leave that be. Okay. So we look up and we see these 2 stars moving together. And I'm like, whoa, that's a weird meteorite. And somebody's like, dude, that's not a meteorite at all. And I look up and they're right. It's connected by like this dark black tube. It's like a cigar shape with two bright lights at each end. And before we saw it, there were like coyotes howling everywhere. There were frogs. We're talking like early September, and
Mhm.
it was pretty warm out. There was lots of things out and about. There were critters afoot. And we look up and it starts falling like a leaf, like this. Like real weird, like the way they were moving was weird. And I was like, that's so strange. And once somebody's like, that's a UFO, everything shut up around us. No more coyotes, no more crickets, no more peep toads, nothing. Dead silence. And I'm like, I don't like this, dudes. We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here right now. I just started getting overwhelmed by panic. And this one guy, who's a pretty stoic guy, he starts crying and saying, we can't leave. We can't leave. And at that point, 3 of the 7 of us heard a sound coming from the woods. No, it was 4 of the 7 of us that sounded like a trumpet mixed with like a semi truck, like slamming on its brakes. It's like a real weird sound, like a rusty screech mixed with
Mhm.
a brass instrument. And we hear it 3 times. It's like, freaked me out, hated it, did not like it. And
It was
then
coming from the woods, or was it coming from up above?
the woods, it was coming from the side of us, but up,
Okay.
like up by the tree lines. It was not coming directly from above us. And I was like, oh, that's not a good noise, guys. And then some people said that it felt like they were swimming in air, like the air got thick, like real thick. And I felt kind of like that. I felt like a heaviness on my shoulders. And at that point, I tell everyone, dude, we got to get out of here. I'm walking back to the house, and it's about a 300-yard walk back to this house. And it's probably about 2:30 in the morning. So I'm trying to get everyone out of there. And they're sitting there and they're telling, like, one dude, like I said, he's crying. He's telling him, we can't leave. And my little cousin's looking at me and she's like, all I can hear in my head is tell them to shut up and stay there. Tell them to shut up and stay there. And I got us all out of there. And one person said it was an hour later than he thought it was. I didn't feel like that. I don't think I had missing time at all, but 1 or 2 people claimed it. One guy's still a skeptic. He was like, that could have been anything. I didn't experience anything weird. One person said he felt like something was following him home the whole night and that there was a person in the car with him. And other people to this day will still tell you, like, their friends about this crazy grandiose UFO they saw with me at my family land.
Wow. That's I've seen all my up close UFOs in this area, in
Yeah.
this
Oh, this area
multi-county
is a
area.
hot spot.
It is. It is. And I've had family that have seen things. My mom's had some things happen to her. She's an experiencer from the past. Like you said, it travels in the family, and it actually does. And I've had a lot of ufologists who told me that, and I've talked to them. They said, yes, they've heard a lot about it. It's passed down from generation to generation. They sort of kind of keep track of us, our DNA structures and how we live. They're monitoring us. And we talked about that there's about 4 different races that are working with the military and the government here on Earth, and it's top secret. It's kind of like above top secret, they call it. So nobody says anything about it, but they do work with them. They exchange technology for allowing them to have free run of our planet, and they also are doing their own experiments. And they tell them, well, don't hurt anybody or don't kill anybody, but you can examine people and you can take their DNA, keep track of what you're watching for here on this earth. They don't like us using nuclear weapons, that's for sure. They're actually following a lot of our space research, or the ships that we send up, like Elon Musk. I think that dude's an alien himself. So yeah, I heard that his ex-wife actually was a humanoid alien.
Grimes?
Yes, his ex-wife.
Really?
Yeah, and
I
they
thought she
they
was
parted. They
Canadian.
part. Yeah, yeah, and they parted in a certain way that was kind of weird. It was a mutual. They still cared for each other, and they cared for the 2 kids they had. But I think it was time they separated because he went on. He wasn't a technocrat. He wasn't an engineer or anything. he comes up with all these ideas of how does he. I've seen him in an interview, and they've asked him, they said, "Are you an ET?" He said, "Yeah, some people say I am," and he kind of chuckles, but they hide that. They are walking amongst us, Cory, and we talked about that earlier. Dr. Jacobs talks about it, and
Yeah, he has the whole hybrid invasion, like.
yeah, yeah, that's what's going on. And
Yeah.
what I met was a humanoid, and actually I've seen them. They've had some bedside things with me, and they took samples. So that's what happened when these two young ones come up to my house back in 2011. But that's my story. But what I'm trying to do is correlate what you're talking about, family,
Yeah,
DNA
yeah.
track.
My mom says it runs in her side of the family. Like, I have uncles that have told me about it. My cousin saw a gray on our family land, not the same family land I saw the UFO, the other side of the family land. Saw like a little gray guy run up a hill like it was nothing, just like hop up it.
Yeah,
And they seem drawn to like a certain area, like a little meadow on top of a hill by a waterfall. And it seems to follow like fairy tale folklore to me, like it's wild.
right.
And yeah, like the Jacques Vallée thought that the passport to Magonia and the whole idea that they've been around us since society started. They come from the forest, they just like pop up, they go, "Hey, we're from the other place," and then they just like, skedaddle. And
Mhm.
I don't know, like I'm torn between the David Jacobs, like it's an invasion that the government's working with, and the whole passport to Magonia, which is they're from this other place right next to us. The government thinks they know about them, but the government doesn't know much of anything. Like, I don't know. Those are the two narratives that fight in my head sometimes. Cause like, I don't trust the government. I've never trusted any government that has ever existed. So if the government's working with ETs to like, send people up for examination for technology, I believe that any government that I've lived under would totally do that. Every single one of them would do
Sure.
that.
Yeah, and they're
However,
they're departmentalized. They
yeah,
don't actually, the military don't know a lot of the times what's going on. It's the black operations, the compartmentalized departments that do this type of work, like at Area 51. Even the president can't go there
right.
unannounced or whatever. But Eisenhower did one time, and of course he threatened them with the National Guard out of Colorado to go down to Area 51 and get him into there. So they sent a representative in his place to go in Area 51 and examine what's going on. And what they found out was that actually Eisenhower went on to meet aliens twice at
Yeah,
Vandenberg.
that's the
Yeah,
Griata stuff, right?
yeah, that was out in California. Was that it's Palm Springs or something like that?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, something like that. And like, see, the only issue I have with that is why would they give us like why would we even make a deal with them? Because they hold all the cards. Like they don't need to wheel and deal with us. They got enough power to kill us all.
Well, actually, they're protecting us. There's actually a couple of races that are protecting us because they created. Remember the Anunnaki?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This goes back way back
Yeah, yeah,
60,000
the
years ago.
Zechariah Sitchin translations. And like
Yeah,
every single culture has this idea that we're created as less than gods, but more than beasts to like do a
right.
purpose for the gods. Yeah, like that's a I mean, I don't get why they wouldn't just build robots though. Like that's my issue with that, where it's like, wouldn't you just build a robot to go mine your gold? Because like I'll get hungry. I'm gonna get mad at you for making me. I'm gonna be like, why would you give me consciousness? I'm gonna beat you up. Like that
Right.
would be my whole
Yeah.
thought if somebody
No,
was
but
like,
this has been going on for millions of years. We've been here and we left, we come back, and the different ET races, they make different vessels. Our bodies are just vessels for our soul.
I
And
figured that
yeah,
much.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just vessels. They make us. I had a dream one time I was on a big ship, a lucid dream. I remember every part of it. And they actually had like three animals that they were making, putting together, and I call it the Noah's Ark, ship that I was on. It had walls, the metal walls, shiny, very clean, not dirty like some people say, or like in Travis Walton's movie back in the 70s. It was really dirty and icky,
Yep. Just a
icky
gritty old
stuff.
spaceship.
Yeah,
Yep.
it wasn't like that. It was very
Okay.
sparkling clean. Yeah, and I met this tall gal, well, tall white, no hair, big almond eyes, very, she was a very beautiful woman, but she was big, but I knew she was alien. And I met her in the hallway and we went over and she transported me back after just walking the hall and visiting and seeing a few things. But what they do is they produce life. They work with DNA and they put it on different planets to where they can
So
survive.
like panspermia. Like
Right.
the
Yeah.
idea of like seeding the whole
Right.
universe with life to see what it does.
Right.
Like
Well,
I could get down with that. Yeah, like put DNA on an asteroid, give it a few billion years and see what happens.
right. Well,
Yeah, that
God,
would be
or
fun.
the source, as they call it, of all
Hmm.
things, he produced aliens just like produced us. I mean, let's call it God produces everybody, but the aliens, they have free thought, free will like we do, and they will make DNA, or they'll make different species that live on different planets. And there's a lot of humanoid species in our galaxy, from what I understand, that most of the planets are humanoid like us. Some of them may look a little different, be pale. Some of them are even light blue skin, but they're kind of like us, humanoids. And they let them have free reign here because it's kind of a peace treaty. Oh, they can destroy us anytime they want, but we actually have 2 or 3 species of aliens that protect us from some of these bad people. And that's why they talk about these little wars they have out in space. They say they're battling all the time. I don't know about all that. I can't prove any of this, Cory, but that's what a lot of talk has been.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Like, yeah, I've been researching a lot about like because I just read that book that Tom DeLonge put out, like the first of the Secret Machines trilogy, and it talks a lot about like a war between gods being like a huge part of our like creative like collective mythology. And I like to like I'm on the fence about Graham Hancock. I really like his stuff. I really like the way he makes me think about prehistory. But at the same time, I take everything as like, oh, okay, I'm very open to that being true. But at the same time, I don't exactly incorporate things into my belief structure unless I have to, you know what I mean? Like I
Right,
have to believe certain things in order for me to exist. But unless it's that, then I'll entertain it. But like I have the idea of like the lower dryads, like the end of the ice age, being
right.
ended by like a blast of a comet, and that
Hmm.
being like the war in the heavens that everyone talks about, and like people having to like migrate everywhere and stuff because of that. But like the asteroid impact ending the lower dryads is still not exactly scientific like accepted yet. But I don't know, I always like to think about the war in the heavens or the war between gods being a comet impact. But then you have like the Hopi from that time. I believe it was the Hopi who talked about the ant people who move them
Right.
underground. Yeah, like that's really weird.
The
Like that's a
Anastas,
strange.
yeah, the Anastasi, yeah,
Yeah, that those are the ones who like they built the pueblos, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah, the super advanced, like really cool.
That all disappeared.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they each one had like ritual chambers that went into like little pits and stuff. I mean, I think one of the worst losses we've had as a collective species is a lot of the mythology that was preserved by like the indigenous people of the Americas before like Europeans got here and stuff. Like they knew what they were doing a lot, and like a lot of them died from like just a wave of plague that hit whenever
right,
we started integrating. But like I don't know, I don't think we did enough to like really preserve their beliefs, and I believe that they still have like this really really cool way of looking at the world that we don't incorporate enough into our overall culture
right. Well,
on their terms.
yeah, the Native
Yeah.
American Indians. I visited the Hopi reservation, talked to a few of them, talked to them about these shapers and things of that nature.
Yeah.
The older ones will not talk to you about it. The younger
Gotcha.
ones will. And I've talked to one. He said he saw a UFO next to this butte that's right there in the Hopi area. And it was very interesting visiting these people. But some of them are really afraid to talk about it because they've seen these things and they're afraid of them. It's like Skinwalker Ranch, what's going on there. And it's weird. I think that's an underground ET base. But we can go back through history, and history is wrong, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, a
We
lot of
really
it
don't,
is.
yeah, we don't know what history really is.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's hard to understand and contextualize it,
yeah,
like a lot of things we'll read about or find we're like, "Oh no, what is this? This is a fertility object." And it's like, "No, that was probably some sort of game. It was probably just a trinket people had." Like we we don't realize that the people who lived back in those days, no matter what the culture was, not too different from us today. We don't know how our technology works. We use it, but we don't know how it works. Like, we're
Right.
really no different than the Aztecs believing that the priest guy sacrificing random people is going to make the sun come back from an eclipse. Like, we're no different than that, really. Like, we operate on this same like level despite having all of this information at our fingertips, because ultimately most people are always the same. So looking back at the past with like today's eyes and being like, oh, these people had like such more simple views or such more esoteric views, even, I think they were just people and they were just farting around, you know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the day, you look at what their leaders say, and it's not too much different from what our leaders say. They promise them like, things will get better if you just let me sacrifice these people on this pyramid,
Right. Mhm.
or things will get better if you build this giant monument to me. And yeah, and I think the aliens, like the mysticism, like the aliens and the mysticism, like they create like this similar thing that's almost like a transcendence above that, you know? Like, you have like dudes wanting to build monuments to their greatness, and then you have people thinking about how to like survive the afterlife. You have people talking about how they've heard the word of God. And like especially like let's look at Christianity, for example. The word of God is, it doesn't matter what these rich people are doing. It doesn't matter what the government's doing. It matters how you treat your fellow human being. And
Yes.
I feel like there's benevolent messages, and then there's also really terrible messages. Like, in the Tom DeLonge book, and give credit or whatever to him, like a lot of that book was written by the co-author. Don't have it in front of me now, and he's like a religious and comparative mythologies teacher. So I look at that and I think to myself, man, like, there's people that are inspired to sacrifice blood to the gods from all over the world for no reason. Like, there's no reason for that to like work, you know? Like, I get pyramids, that's the best way to stack rocks. But human sacrifice, like, what does that do? So then
There's a
that,
theory, Corey. There's
yeah.
a theory that I think about. Of course, the reptilians have been involved with our human society for years. They've been underground, lived underground, and so is the Nephilim. And that biblical part about the Nephilim is actually true, I think, from looking at it and researching it. But what I found is that these beings existed throughout time, even the Garden of Eden. The snake was a reptilian, actually, not a snake. The apple was knowledge. It wasn't a real apple. It was
Mhm.
knowledge. Then we go back and we talk about how religions destroyed other civilizations' technology and their knowledge, like in Alexandria, where that library there was burned and torched. This is through the Christian beliefs. And also the Mayans, the Incas, they destroyed a lot of their technology and a lot of their references. And they told them not to destroy it because they said there's a lot of knowledge in there. And they thought they were devils. So the Spaniards went ahead and burned all their information.
Yep.
So there goes the history, you know?
Yep.
Uh, is this all synchronicities that's supposed to happen throughout our civilizations? I don't
I
know.
think, I mean, honestly, the way I view it is, every time something tells us it's God, we tend to listen to it because we know that we're pretty limited, you know? Like, we know our limitations. We're mortals. We die, we're weak, we're sick. We can't do much. Like, we're not even all that smart, really. But then you have something come up to you and you're like, "Hey, what's up? I'm God. You should do this." And you're like, "Give me proof that I'm God." And then all of a sudden a bush is on fire. All of a sudden you know something that's going to happen before it happens. All of a sudden you're making these prophecies and people believe that you have the word of God in you. And then it's real easy to command populations to do whatever you want. So if you're an alien race, I don't get why that would matter to you. But if you were like this race that shared the same planet as us, but just a little out of sync, you know?
Mhm.
Oh, I would totally understand why you'd want to boss around entire groups of people. Like the whole legend of the jinn created by smokeless fire before men,
Right. Mhm.
and they're jealous of humanity. Like, yeah, I get that. I would be pretty pissed too if like a bunch of these weird little naked monkeys started running around thinking they were the coolest thing ever and I could make them do crazy stuff. I mean, to me that makes sense. It's almost like the Jacques Vallée mixed with David Jacobs, where it's like this race of, dare I say, extra dimensional entities that are trying to mess with us for their own. I don't know. I have
Yeah.
no idea what they could possibly want. Like
Well, they actually control us by frequencies. Frequencies is a big deal, right? I mean, frequencies, if we knew how to handle them, we can actually raise those big stones that they did back in Egypt, and other civilizations have had these big monuments. I mean, these 100-ton stones. How did they move those? So it has to be some kind of futuristic technology that come back and help these people. But I look at the like ancient aliens. I watched it for archaeology sense. You know, you get a sense of the archaeology these people had and the technology that it took, and you think, you scratch your head, they couldn't have done that. You know?
I don't know. I think they could have done a lot of them. Like I saw a lot of the Easter Island things that they've replicated with trees that could have gone extinct from like a fungus that lived on the island.
Right.
I think the Rapa Nui could have done it. Like there's some monuments I'm like, I think they could have done it, but why did they do it? Like let's say for like sake of argument, they totally did it with whatever they had. Why do it? Like why believe so strongly in an afterlife if you don't have evidence? Why believe in this secret world of like mysticism and beings and humanoid entities without proof of them? You know, like they've created this whole, like Egypt borrowed from Sumeria. You have like the slaying of Tiamat, which
Right.
is one of the most insane creation myths ever. Like the Jews living in Chaldean captivity wrote their creation myth in the Bible pretty much based on the Sumerian one. Like it's come up through the ages of, hey, we're made of god blood. Like we have the same blood as the gods, but we aren't the gods because we're mortal. You know, it's almost like we have like a shut off switch.
Right.
So if we were engineered by a sentient race, you know, I feel like that's possible. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I believe in like the Darwinian like evolution as well, but at the same time, humanity's a little weird and there were different species of us. Like you got Neanderthals, you
Mm-hmm.
got Denisovans, you got Homo florensius, the little hobbit people of Indonesia,
Yeah.
like, and you know
Cro-Magnon.
they all got together at some point. Like Homo erectus met Homo florensius and Homo neanderthalis met like the Denisovans people, and they bred and they fought and they partied, like, and just how many of our myths of like giants could have come from like the Denisovans? Like they had
Mm-hmm.
these giant jaws and they were much bigger than us and they were like adapted to living in mountain climates. And you know, that's something really cool. But then, like, even if I can science my way out of all of these myths, there still lies this essence, you know, like this intelligence that seems to be directing it,
Right.
like this composer, like the conductor. And even if like half the stuff about like Griata's disinformation or it's true, regardless, there's like this unseen force that none of us really can put a finger on, and we're all just mad that we don't have the same access that like the government does, you know, because
Yeah.
the
There are.
government can do whatever they want. They can be like, here's my badge, I'm taking this spaceship, and
Mhm.
man,
Well,
that's kind of rude.
they did that with giant skeletons. They've
Yeah,
been
like the
retrieving those
Smithsonian.
and taking those from museums, and they're hiding that from us. But the giants were real, and L.A. Marzulli. I
I
don't know
do
if you
like
know
a
him.
little LA Marzulli.
Yeah, he had this. He interviewed 3 soldiers in. They were in Iraq. No,
Oh,
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, the Kandahar
Kandahar.
giant.
Right.
Yeah,
They killed a Kandahar giant. That's in my
that's so
book, and I
wild.
talk. Yeah, yeah, and they have 3 that come forward, but that's top secret. They're not supposed to talk about it. He was 13 feet, and he was about 1,000 or so pounds, and they shot him for 30 seconds and before he fell. That's in my new book that's coming out. I go from all over this the map on that with the Egyptians. Actually, some of the Christianity beliefs in the Bible come
Mhm.
from the Egyptians'
Oh,
beliefs.
absolutely.
Yeah,
What was his name? Amun Ra was the god that
uh,
was Akhenaten.
yeah,
Akhenaten
the
was the
sun god. Yeah,
monotheist one.
yeah,
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 the monotheist, and like Amen comes from there. Like
yeah.
a lot of like Hebrew roots are like shared with Egyptian, and they're all shared with Sumerian. Like Ur is the hometown of like the patriarch Abraham, and that's Sumerian. The
Right.
guy was a Sumerian, basically, like some of the most ancient of stuff. So to me, it all goes back to that. And there could be a more ancient civilization, a more like proto civilization that, like, at the end of the Lower Dryads, there was a flood apparently that flooded like a lot of stuff. And there's some theories that Southeast Asia, where Indonesia is now, was like more of a solidified continent before it was an island chain.
Yeah.
And
Right.
yeah, it all flooded, and then you have, like, Doggerland, which is between the UK and Europe, like, a whole mass of land that got flooded about, like, 13,000 years ago.
Hmm.
There were so many underwater places that once had human habitation, like, even off the Gulf of Aden down in, like, Saudi Arabia and, like, Yemen and stuff, you have sunken civilizations, and it's like, even if the alien mythos is not what we think it is, we are not looking at these people's mythologies with the credence and truth they deserve, you know? Like the Great Flood mythos is not just a Bible thing. It came from Sumeria. It came
Right.
from the
Com-
Mayans.
Comes from
Everyone
all
has
cultures.
a flood myth.
Yeah. Noah, he wasn't really famous except for the ark when God told him how to make the ark. And I
Yeah,
think the ark was actually a spaceship. I'm sorry, but
that's cool.
yeah. And then they did not take two of each animal. What they did is they took DNA of each animal, and that's made it a little easier to do, I guess. But Noah ended up being 960 years old when he passed, and
Yeah,
and,
you
and out
can't.
of the book of Enoch, all of them lived almost to 1,000 years of age back then.
Yup.
Those people had to be ET.
I
Noah
mean,
was tall. He was light complected, blue eyes. He didn't look like the typical Middle Eastern person. So they talk about that. Enoch talks about that. He glowed when he was in a room. And also with Jesus. I'm getting into Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. I don't want people to think I'm an atheist here. But when he went up to a mount, he took Peter, James, and I think, and
the
what the
Transfiguration.
yeah, transfiguration.
Yeah.
He just glowed white, and he was this pure bright white light. And I thought, wow, that tells me. And then he also shapeshifted. In my
Yeah.
book, I've actually got some Bible verses that talks about him shapeshifting, and that's why Judas, he had to kiss him on the lips to let these temple soldiers know who exactly Jesus was, because he shapeshifted. He changed his looks. Now, this might be, a lot of people that go to church stuff like, oh, Dave, you're being Nathan. No, I'm not. I believe in Jesus. I believe in the good words that he taught us. A lot of people didn't understand it back then, but now I think we understand it more so, forgiveness and love and all this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love the idea of Jesus being like, ignore your wealth, ignore the power above you, and just be the best person you can for those around you. It's super beautiful message. And also, like, post-resurrection, Thomas didn't recognize him. And
Right.
Thomas hung out with him for like 3 years, just walking
Hmm.
around and stuff. And in order for Thomas to like see his wounds, you know. So there's a lot to say about like Jesus like not exactly adhering to the same shape. And also, I think one of the earliest conspiracies of all time is not putting Enoch in the Bible. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
What's
right.
Enoch not doing in the Bible? That's a little weird to me.
There's about 13 books, Mary Magdalene, and
Mhm.
Judas, actually.
Yep, the
So
Gnostic Gospels.
yeah. So you look at, people are saying, Dave, you're saying that Jesus was an ET. Yeah, because two angels impregnated Mother Mary,
That's
and so where'd they get the DNA to impregnate her? And she was young and she wasn't married and she was still a virgin. So how did that happen? So explain it.
yeah, no, it's
It's,
super weird.
yeah, yeah. So I don't like getting into religion, but because a lot of people that if I go to church and I tell them that I wrote a book on UFOs and I believe in ETs and everything else, they kind of look at me kind of strange and they walk away. We were talking earlier. How are
Mhm.
people going to accept disclosure? Can
Oh,
you?
they're not.
Yeah.
Oh, no, they're absolutely not. Like, we can't even accept things that we find alien about each other, you know what I mean? Like we look at like too many people look at each other and they see things about each other that like make them uncomfortable. We can't even accept other people having alien views or alien lifestyles to us. So how could we accept like aliens? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like whatever aliens are, wherever they come from, they're not going to be like us. I mean, it's hard pressed to get like an American to like see humanity in like a person from another country and vice versa, you know? Like it's hard to get a Chinese person to see humanity in people who aren't Chinese. I mean, look at the Uyghur camps they got going on. And
Right.
it's hard for us to like even in interpersonal relationships, like men, women, races, genders, like sexual preferences, like we alienate each other so much that how could we accept another alien race?
Yeah. Do you think that I think the ETs developed different races and ethnic groups, and just to see it's a test to see how we all get along and how we can love each other. There is a lot of culturalism. I mean, we have people from every country in the U.S. and they can't call us racist because we have all these people here. I mean, we have like Mexican restaurants, Greek restaurants, Chinese restaurants, Japanese restaurants. We do all that, but you go to other countries, they don't have all that like we do.
Right. I mean,
We're more accepting of other cultures. I'll tell you
I
the
think
truth.
that we could totally do better with how we treat like people different than like just white people. But at the
Right.
same time, we don't realize how bad other countries are to people who are not in the in group. Like, I mean, like the hegemony of like China and Japan, for example, and like you have ethno states out there where people are like, no, don't bring your other cultures in. This is what we have. We are going to keep it like this. And the USA, like, we do have a lot of cultural mixing, and it does create like a lot of tension sometimes. And people believe that they should be the in group. People believe they should be the power group. And like the answer is nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all equally pretty dumb. And I like that.
Yeah.
And I
And how
think the
many?
US
Yeah.
has a better chance of being a I the only issue I have with the US with that is we could be doing so good that we make the rest of the world have to meet us where we're at.
Yeah.
And I think
I
I think Europe's beating us right now with that a little
yeah.
bit.
Well, right now I don't know about that because they're having their problems. They go against the Muslims there. There's a
Oh,
problem with the
that's right.
Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They
they
went ahead and they bombed Libya until they had a an influx of like people from Libya and Syria. It's like, oh
right.
no, you went and bombed a country and now those people are looking for places to stay and oops, maybe you
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that.
Well, just like the book I wrote, I just wrote finished the manuscript. I have all the religions in there.
Yeah.
Buddha, Muslim. I'm not differentiating between any of them.
No.
I give them all a certain amount of credit. And reincarnation is the big word, and you
Yes, it
heard
was
that
in
too.
early Christianity too.
Yes,
Reincarnation was in early Christian texts.
right.
They took it out.
And I think the ETs, they believe in reincarnation because our bodies are a vessel. We talked about that earlier. And we have a soul that goes away from us. And Jesus one time was talking to his disciples. And when he come up, like you were talking about doubting Thomas, he come up and showed his wounds. Well, he made a little mishap, a little mistake in Luke and I think in Matthew. He told them, he said, you all act like you're seeing a ghost. Well, Jesus said, really there weren't no ghosts. So there's spirits that leave after 3 days after the body dies. So I don't want to get too much into that. We're running out of time, but anything you want to say, Cory, about what we discovered?
Um, honestly, yeah, like I feel like a lot of people look at the phenomenon with like I guess horror or like paranoia. And I personally think it is one of the most inescapable parts of the human experience. Like, to me, the idea of encountering otherworld intelligences or non human entities is part of what it means to be a human being. Like, I feel like it's always going to happen. And I don't know if we'll ever have answers. Like, as far as disclosure goes, I don't trust the government of any nation to tell us the truth about anything.
I
So,
think, yeah, they're going to hide a lot of stuff. Well, the show's over. It went by so fast, Cory. And, we're listening to Cory Sellars, my homie, and
yep.
it's been a good time. And this is the Dave Emmons Show. And we like to thank you for watching and listening in and hope that you enjoy the show. Thank you very much. And good evening, good night, or good morning.